All right, so here's what I'll do on page 63. I'll work number 6 in this class, but in the other classes I'll try to work a different problem. Maybe try to get them all on it. That way you see a few different assignments, a few different problems.
We still don't want to turn this in.
I still do want you to turn it all over. Yeah. All right. So number 6 says 0 equals 2x squared. So remember, keep conversations focused on the work, not on each other.
That's not cute.
All right. Okay. So on this one, it's already set equal to 0, so I don't have to do anything with it, other than go ahead and start the factoring process. Okay. And as we've been doing it here, again, some of y'all don't use this method, and that is fine, but this is the one that I'm kind of sticking with for our purposes. 2x squared and a 1 goes in those two boxes. First term in the first box, last term in the bottom box. Multiply those two together. It's a real simple multiplication here. And then, because this is positive, 2x squared, my factors both have to be the same. And since this over here is negative, they're both going to have to be negative. And the good thing about this one is the factors of 2 are just 1 and 2. And so you got negative x and negative 2x. And I'm going to pause for just a second for those of y'all that are trying to write. The 0 is on the other side of the equation, and that's what we want. We want everything equal to 0. And if you look at a lot of the other ones, they all say 0 equals or equals 0. So on this one, you don't have to move anything around. No, the example I did, you had to move something over. But on these, you don't. So to continue this one, we'll put the negative x and the negative 2x in those other two boxes. That's our factors that added up to the negative 3x in the middle. And then we start looking at our common factors for each row and for each column. So remember, our signs for our factors are the same as in this column as out here. So this will be a positive, this will be a negative. Up here, the same process. That'll be a positive, that'll be a negative because these signs. All right, so what do these two have in common? What does x and 1 have in common? Real simple, 1. Okay, what does 2x squared and negative 2x have in common? 2 and x. Okay. That's the largest factor there. Looking in this first column, they both have an x in common. Looking in this column, they both have a 1 in common. All right, so our factors. Factor down. On the column is 2x minus 1. Along the top is x minus 1. And we still have our equal 0 out there from the problem. Some of y'all are trying to write real fast. I'm wondering if some of y'all didn't turn in work. You're just trying to get a couple answers down. I don't know. Well, there's a whole bunch of people I'm throwing that shade at.
A lot of people do their work, they're trying to write the answer.
All right. So to finish off this problem, we set each factor equal to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0. Or x minus 1 has to equal 0. And remember, that's the case because for this to equal 0, one of the factors has to be 0. The only way to get a 0 for a product is if one of your two factors is 0. And then we just solve each of those. So add 1 to both sides here. That's 2x equals 1. Divide by 2, and so x equals 1/2. And then over here, it's even easier. Just add 1 to both sides. X equals 1. So my solution, x equals 1/2 and 1. Question is, other than just trying to copy it down fast, is there a part you're struggling with? Is there something that we're not getting quite right?
If we if we just leave it like in the parentheses, does it need count off?
Right here?
Yeah, what if we
No, the directions actually say to solve. If you leave it here, all you've done is factored. You haven't solved. And so you haven't answered the problem. Now, as you're kind of finishing this up, don't forget, there will be a quiz over this on Thursday. And for those of y'all that did poorly on the previous quiz, if you do well on this one, it's going to replace that grade. So,
What if we do bad on this?
do what?
I said, what if we did good on the other one?
You're still going to take this one because it's going to count for another quiz grade too.
So if we do bad on this quiz, we still one grade?
If you do bad on this quiz, yes.
That's not a win.
So you want to do good on this one.
I know.
There's the win.
Not a win. So take this right.
I mean, you'll get the partial credit. So if you were able to do the one last week, you should be able to get to here no problem. If you can get to here no problem, this is the easy stuff. Hey, forget about it, but it's the easier part. So that's that example. We'll do some more today and tomorrow over those, just as we kind of get prepared, and Wednesday too. Just kind of reviewing and practicing and doing a lot of work with it. So let's look at one more type of problem that I think is actually even easier, and so hopefully you'll think the same thing. Some of y'all will, some of y'all won't, because you just want to complain anyway. All right. So we're still solving. And we're still solving a quadratic equation, but there is a difference here. Hey, what's the difference here than the problems you just got through doing? Yeah, we're missing that x term. Okay. So we only have one term that has a variable in it. So y'all, if you only have one term that has a variable, you can just solve the way we've always solved. Okay, so instead of trying to get the 0 over here, we want to get the variable by itself. And so this goes back to kind of algebra 1, a little bit, even a little bit younger in that on some of it, but we're going to use an extra piece too. So when you're missing the variable and you're told to solve, again, all you're going to do is get that variable by itself. So we start out by getting rid of the minus 180 by adding it to both sides. And so 5x squared equals 180. And what would the next step be? Divide by what? Trying to get that x squared by itself, divide both sides by 5. So then how do we get x by itself with that x squared there? Anybody know what the opposite of squaring something is? The opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. Okay. So to get rid of this x squared, what we do is you take the square root of both sides. All right. So what is the square root of 36? 6. Now, remember when we talked about the graph, how many solutions do we have on a quadratic? All we found was one here. Except you can also have a negative. because a negative 6 squared is also 36. Okay. So that is the setup. Okay. So why did we use this? Because we were missing that x term in the middle. Okay. If you're missing that x term, then you can solve it this direction. It makes it a little bit easier. I'll try to start this one, see what you can do with it, and get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm frustrated now, I gotta stop. And you can stop for a second. Try to get this one started. See if you can. Alright. So listen through this process. Get your phones put away, y'all. I don't want to have to collect them. Trying to get, if the x term's gone, so trying to get that x squared by itself. So to get rid of that minus 25, we add it. And then you divide both sides by 4. And I didn't even think about leaving this, or changing this to a decimal, but I noticed almost all of you did that I was looking around at. I'd have left it as 25 over 4. It'd just be a little one less step for me. Okay, and at this point, take the square root of both sides. So x equals what? What does x equal? So negative 2.5 and positive 2.5. Now, how many of y'all all like to shorten things? You don't have to write as much. Now, instead of writing both of those, what you can end up doing is putting a plus sign over a minus sign, and that's read as positive or negative 2.5. So instead of repeating it with a positive and then a negative, you can just put it like this. Okay. Now, what I would have done is instead of actually putting this as a decimal, I left it like this. And then when I took the square root, you can take the square root of the top, which is 5, and the square root of the bottom, which is 2. And that's what I would have done. Mostly because fractions do not scare me. I don't get confused by them. For a lot of us, you go straight to decimals, so that's fine. Same answer. The only problem is every once in a while you're going to have one where it's not going to be that easy. It'll be a long decimal, and you can't actually write it all in there. So know this process up here too, and we'll look at it on one of the next examples. All right, how are we doing on this one? Does that make a little bit of sense? Keep working a couple more here, and maybe I'll go back to one of those other kinds of problems. Yeah. All right, 3x squared equals 24. So work this one out and see what you can do with it. All right. What's the first step on this one? Yeah, divide by 3, because it's already, we're missing the x term, so we can still do this. So we have x squared equals what?
8.
See? So what's the next step? Square root. So what's our answer? Plug in square root of 8 and see what you get. 2.8287.
No, I don't think it's a 7. I know it's 2.82.
So my question is, how are we going to do this? Well, if you round it to 2.83, then we didn't solve because we didn't get something equal to it. We got something close to it. We didn't get something equal to it. But if you phone, I don't want to have to take it up. But that'll be the next step. Okay. So how do we go about this? Well, first off, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to leave it like that for just a second. So you can't put like 2.83, anything like that, unless it's an exact answer. And so one of the things you can do is leave it like this. But anytime you're solving, and especially as you get like taking ACTs and that kind of stuff, they're going to want the square roots, the radicals, in simplified form. And so what you need to do is kind of rewrite this to where, are there any perfect squares that are factors of 8? So remember what the perfect squares are? 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49. Talked a little bit about this, I think, last week. 41, 100. So there's the first 10 of them. Okay. And so we know that 4 goes into 8. So I'm going to rewrite this. Rewrite 8 as 4 times 2. Because then I can take the square root of the 4. And so what you end up doing, you got the plus or minus sign. You take the square root of the 4, which is 2, and then you leave the other 2 underneath. So there ends up being my official simplified answer. Even though I don't think this looks more simple than the other one, but it is the simplified version. If you leave it like this, you're going to end up losing, like, if it's 5 points, you'll probably lose a half of a point. Well, for some of us, for some people, that's a big deal. So if you leave it as square root of 8, so you'll lose because you didn't follow through with the simplified part. You got an answer, and it's a decent one, but it's not quite perfect. So if you're one of those that's okay with not getting a perfect answer, just know, don't ask me for a half of a point when you have an 89.2, when you want an A for the semester or something, you know. If a half of a point's not that important to you. All right. Everybody good with that one? I know this part down here is kind of a little bit more difficult, but this is something you would have done a little bit of in Algebra 1 and even some in geometry. And so let's kind of review pieces of that too. All right. Let me see if I can get you upset at me here real quick. Start the problem out with a fraction. So on this one, remember fractions are just numbers, so we're just going to start out by adding 1/4 to both sides. So x squared equals 1/4. Okay, so what's the next step? Yeah, go ahead and take the square root. So x equals plus or minus, what's the square root of 1? 1, what's the square root of 4? There you go. X equals plus or minus 1/2. Questions, anybody? Say what? If you take the square root of the 1, that's 1. Take the square root of the 4, that's 2. So for square root, you can just take the square root of each one individually, and it's the same process. So we got about 20 minutes. So here's what I want you to do. So look in the. Go back into the workbook. Look at page 64. One through what?
1 through 5. That sounds reasonable. I thought you did good today.
We'll do that. I'll be okay with that. So page 64 in the workbook.
What is that?
Look at problems 1 through 5.
What is not work?
Now, having said that, 2 of the problems, 1 and 4, are like the other ones we had through the box method, or however you want to do the factoring part. 3 of them are like the ones we just got through doing. Okay.